Magic mirror. Hello, baby. Up. Where are you going? Going in the window. Yeah. Whoa, big head. Hey. And so Hagrid. Hello, everybody. there. Should be new. So glad in my day.
charmers, master manipulators. Some of history's most heinous killers seemingly had a born skill to seduce or disarm their prey.
I admired him. He was a very charismatic person.
When he said jump, they jumped.
Forensic psychologist Lou Schlesinger has spent decades delving into the minds of murderers.
They look normal, and so potential victims relax, and then they've got you.
Serving detective Jackie Sabir is an expert in the mechanics of crime.
The use of the garrote, he's used that not only to control his victim, but actually now he's using that to kill her as well.
Between them, they're unraveling a case that horrified a community.
The injuries on this young woman's body, unimaginable.
Anybody can do that to a young girl. Terrible.
And investigating if its perpetrator was born to join this most diabolical of clubs.
I've met real evil, and he conned us all.
Serving British police detective Jackie Sabir has worked on some of the country's most high-profile murder cases. She's in Anderston in Scotland to study the actions of a killer that shocked the nation and bewildered those people that had known him.
So we're literally just outside Glasgow city centre, and this is the M8 that runs through the heart of Glasgow. And you can see St Patrick's Roman Catholic Church just over there. And that was the scene in 2006 of probably one of the most brutal and disturbing murders that Glasgow has had.
In 2006, Anderston was an inner city community emerging from its industrial past.
Anderston had been part of the shipbuilding era in Glasgow. A lot of tenement flats, a lot of old buildings, a lot of working men's pubs. Anderston is a place of history. It went through some bad times. It was an area that was developing. There was the church there, St Patrick's Church, and that was a main focal point in the Anderston area.
St Patrick's Church plays a big part in the community there. People coming and going in the city pop into it. The doors were always open.
A regular face helping out at the church was a young 23-year-old Polish student.
Angelika Kluk worked as a cleaner at St Patrick's Church to make more money, to send it back to her family, to improve her education. There was space for her to get some board and lodgings, and I think also develop her English. She knew the priest. She was friendly with the handyman. She knew everything round about it. And all of a sudden, on the 25th of September 2006, she disappeared.
It would be 4 days before Angelika's whereabouts were discovered. She was still at the church. Senior forensic scientist Carol Rogers was one of the first on the spot.
A really sharp-eyed police officer noticed one of the sections of the carpet just didn't sit quite right, and they noticed a trapdoor directly underneath the carpet. And Angelika was right underneath the trapdoor. It appeared to be a sexually motivated murder.
Did you go down into the crawl space?
Yeah. And I had to basically put my hands above my head and wriggle down through the space.
Can you describe what Angelika looked like when you've gone down into this crawl space?
Her hands were up near her head, and they were bound with cable ties, and I could see there was quite a lot of blood. Her upper clothing had been pushed up above her breasts, so her stomach was exposed. Her body was sampled in situ for seminal fluid, and in fact we did find a lot of seminal fluid.
As well as being subjected to a sadistic rape, Angelika had been stabbed 16 times in the chest and her head repeatedly bludgeoned.
The injuries on this young woman's body was such unimaginable.
Forensic psychologist Professor Lou Schlesinger has worked extensively with the FBI, untangling the minds and motives of serial killers. For him, the vicious MO demonstrated with the body of Angelika Kluk is a red flag.
When you look at the attack and see how frenzied it was, it indicates to me this isn't a good example of overkill. It's just a pouring out of this individual's anger on her. And you know that the motive was not robbery. The motive was even probably not simply sex. The amount of force used was far in excess of what would be necessary to commit the ostensible crime. He wanted to destroy her. He basically wanted to dehumanize her.
And these traits have been seen before in some of history's most infamous serial killers. During the 60s, Albert DeSalvo preyed on Boston's unsuspecting residents.
Albert DeSalvo, otherwise known as the Boston Strangler, was a very charming and very manipulative individual. He would go to a woman, say, "You look very, very beautiful. I'm a photographer. Can I take your pictures?" Once DeSalvo got inside the apartment, he immediately turned and he attacked them.
DeSalvo is believed to have killed more than 10 women. His MO featured savagely violent garroting.
He attacked them in a blitz-style fashion. They had no idea anything like that was even coming.
Most who met Ted Bundy would encounter a charming, likable young man. Little did they know he was one of the 20th century's most prolific and violent serial killers.
I got the sweet Ted, who would walk me out to my car at 2 in the morning, and he'd say, "Ann, please lock the doors. I don't want anything bad to happen to you on the way home." Well, I just been locked up with probably the most dangerous man in the western states.
Bundy's true persona was borne out by his ferocious actions on a Florida campus in 1978.
The dispatcher called and said, "Sarge, we've got 2 dead and 2 dying." All that built-up feelings burst out in a shark frenzy in that sorority house. It was a shark frenzy.
These were sexually motivated murders. The killing itself was sexually arousing for Bundy. It was eroticized for him.
I said, "Ted, why did you, what did you do all this for?" He says, "I liked it."
So Ted Bundy, Albert DeSalvo, these are individuals who appeared completely non-threatening to potential victims. And that's how they got the victims to relax. And that's when they all attacked them. And they did so in a very, very violent and very brutal way.
In Glasgow, Detective Jackie Sabir is learning just how brutal a death 23-year-old student Angelika Kluk suffered.
We found blood on the ceiling which suggests that this weapon had been used in a swinging action. So in our opinion, she was struck several times within the garage with this table leg, and that would have explained her horrendous head injuries.
For Detective Jackie Sabir, the perpetrator's likely path gives an invaluable insight.
So Angelique has been murdered in the garage here, which just corresponds to the green door over there. The body's been transferred all the way along here until just on the outside edges of the trap door. And you've got to know where that trap door is. For me, the killer has a good working knowledge of this building.
As detectives focused on the murder scene, they discovered one church worker had been in the garage with the victim on the night of her death. Handyman Pat McLaughlin was a well-liked member of the church community.
Father Jerry spoke very, very highly of him. He thought he was a saint because he came and he needed that much done and he was doing it all. Thought he was the bee's knees.
His colleagues recall McLaughlin was particularly charming when amongst female company.
Pat McLaughlin was quite a talkative person to women, you know. I think he fancied himself as one time as a bit of Valentino, you know. Always wanting to oblige women.
The women, he'd be all after with them and carrying on different things.
He was a good-looking, charming type person. People turned to Pat McLaughlin, Mr. Nice Man. This was a person that people trusted.
But since Angelica's horrific death, the jovial Pat McLaughlin had disappeared. Forensic psychologist Lou Schlesinger and serving detective Jackie Sabir are unravelling a case that horrified a Scottish community. In September 2006, student Angelica Kluke's body was found concealed beneath the floor of a Glasgow church. For Jackie Sabir, the mechanics of the murder tell her something about its perpetrator.
His calculated manner, the confidence he had in disposing of the bodies, suggest he is very comfortable in working in that sort of environment. And I would be completely open-minded as an investigator to consider the possibility that he had used fatal violence previously.
In the aftermath of the twisted crime, detectives were keen to talk to St. Patrick's missing handyman, the charming and well-liked Pat McLaughlin.
The night of the murder, Pat McLaughlin was very drawn, as if he'd been very ill. And he says, I'm not feeling too good tonight, Cathy. I think it's my heart.
And with McLaughlin nowhere to be seen, police reached out to those who knew him.
Police came to me to ask me questions about him, and I gave them a photograph. It went nationwide at 6 o'clock at night, and I've been told that the phones were jammed by 6:05.
People came forward and identified that that person was not Patrick McLaughlin, who was in fact Peter Tobin.
60 years earlier, the man revealed as Peter Tobin had been born the second of 8 children in Johnston, a textile town to the west of Glasgow. As a young constable working the streets, David Swindle knew the area well.
So we know that Tobin was born in 1946. What do you know about his early life?
He was brought up in a working class, a big family. His father worked as an engineer. It was a working class area. It would have been the case that most of the people in his community were probably quite poor. It would be poverty, difficult times, and he would be someone that was dragged up, not brought up.
Barely into his primary school years, Peter Tobin was displaying delinquent behaviour.
He was in and out of institutions from a very young age.
He went off the rails very quickly. Chaotic childhood. He came to the attention of the police when he was very young. He was put into some sort of approved school when he was 7 years old.
What type of crimes was he committing as a young person?
It was crimes of dishonesty, you know, breaking into cars, breaking into houses, stealing. He becomes institutionalised, he becomes stereotyped, he becomes labelled as a criminal.
Forensic psychologist Lou Schlesinger has studied the childhoods of some of history's most charming and manipulative killers. Many share the same early experiences of incarceration.
You're dealing with other criminals, and so you develop a criminal thinking pattern. He learned how to be highly manipulative, how to get over on people, and to be able to detect who is susceptible.
It's heaven right here, Jack, right here.
In 60s California, former delinquent Charles Manson would mastermind a string of bloody slayings.
Charles Manson was raised in institutions. He had no family, nobody wanted him, and the correctional officers basically raised him.
Manson was a very institutionalized person who felt more comfortable in a confined or isolated place.
If someone beats you with a whip and you love the whip, what's he doing? He's making a fool out of himself.
By his release, Manson's time on the inside taught him to control people on the outside.
Manson learned early on how to read people, who were the potential targets, and how to tell them what they wanted to hear so that he can get over on them.
As a cult leader, Manson's manipulation was so extreme, he convinced young middle-class women to murder.
He did control them, and when he said jump, they jumped.
He could get them to do anything he wanted them to do.
He was definitely a father figure to everybody. I admired him. He was a very charismatic person.
The average person is taught to trust people. He's a nice guy, seems pleasant, and so on. That's not Manson. They look at life in a very, very different way.
In 2006, following the Glasgow murder of Angelica Kluk, police discovered a missing handyman, Pat McLaughlin, had been using an alias and was in fact Peter Tobin. And Tobin had a history. "13 years previously, Tobin had been known as Peter Wilson, again living the life of a committed churchgoer and charming the local community.
Tobin, like lots of Catholics of that generation, would have been a churchgoer as a child. If you go to the Mass and you can recite the creed without stumbling, it's quite a big chunk of the way to being accepted.
But in reality, Tobin was using the church to hide out following a sadistic crime. In 1993, the divorced father was looking after his 5-year-old son when he managed to successfully put 2 teenage girls at ease.
Tobin used his son to lure 2 teenage girls into his company. He gave them drugs and rendered them virtually comatose.
These were trusting babysitters. He had sexual pleasure with these young girls, tried to kill them.
He closed all the windows and he turned on all the gas appliances in the house but didn't light them.
He imprisoned them in the house and left. And he left them for dead.
Tobin served 10 years in prison for the twisted attack. But then the convicted sex offender disappeared off the police's radar.
Peter Tobin travelled extensively throughout the UK. He would live in one place in the south of England. He would also have an address and be living there or be there in Scotland. He had numerous aliases, hundreds of aliases.
Because Tobin is able to lie so convincingly, he was able to just merge into communities very easily and gain confidence of the people there.
But in 2006, Peter Tobin's luck would run out. As the convicted sex offender faced questioning, he would deny killing Angelica Kluk, but DNA found at the murder scene linked him directly to the heinous crime.
We searched the national DNA database, and that's when we got the hit against Peter Tobin.
The minute you hear that, you think, well, he's done it. That's the right man.
As Tobin was taken into custody, those who worked with the charming handyman struggled to come to terms with his actions.
I've met real evil. I can see that. I met real evil in Peter Tobin. And he managed to do it because he gave her a persona of an all-round good guy. And he conned us all.
Anybody can do that to a young girl is absolutely terrible.
That he could pull the wool over people's eyes, that he could blend into a community, that he could use the social skills that he undoubtedly has to make people like him and trust him.
And Peter Tobin had fooled others before.
Peter used to be very good at getting me home in time. Therefore, my mother had no reason to stop me seeing him. He was a good boyfriend, and I thought I've met the guy of my dreams.
During the 1960s, 16-year-old Margaret was captivated by Peter Tobin in the dance halls of Glasgow.
Tobin swept Margaret off her feet, and Margaret was very young and she was naive. I mean, he may well have been her first serious boyfriend.
Margaret's rose-tinted view ended abruptly when she agreed to spend some time at Tobin's flat.
It got near 11 o'clock. I said, I need to go, Peter. Headed to the front door. Went to open it, then it was just slam shut. And that was me kidnapped for the next year and a bit.
He was violent, he was aggressive, and obviously suddenly became clear that he was a controlling individual. You know, she would do what he said and nothing else.
He started to hit me about having non-consensual sex as and when he wanted. Anytime I wanted to try and even go to the toilet, he was there making sure that, because the toilet door was next to the front door, that I wouldn't get out.
Violence, intimidation, loss of friendships. He isolated her from family and friends.
"40 years later, in 2006, Peter Tobin was in custody for the church killing of Angelica Kluk. Although he was safely off the streets, concerns were mounting that this was not his first taste of murder.
I very quickly assessed from the concealment, the conduct after the crime, the savageness of this attack, that this was someone who had killed before.
Detective Swindle launched Operation Anagram to open up the mysterious life of Peter Tobin.
Anagram would have been dissecting Tobin's life in real minute detail. Because he had lived up and down the country, there hadn't been that collation of his evidence and his offending history.
Alongside dozens of mobile phones and stolen goods found at various addresses, police also discovered a worrying hoard.
We've got items of jewellery, so the question I have to ask is, why does a killer have items of women's jewellery in his possession?
As detectives looked through unsolved disappearances, a headline-grabbing case from 1991 caught their attention.
Vicky Hamilton was a 15-year-old girl who was full of life and had lots of friends, well loved by her family.
I remember very clearly Vicky Hamilton going missing. It was a massive thing. I remember her face being on posters and milk cartons.
Detective David Swindle recalls the night of her disappearance following a visit to her sister.
Vicky Hamilton was standing at a bus stop here in Bathgate, waiting for the bus. She was alone. And she just disappeared. She's here and never seen again.
It was technically a missing persons inquiry, but obviously the longer the period of time goes by, the more likely it is to be a murder.
So what lines of inquiry were the team following? What evidence did they manage to recover about it?
We found her purse. Her purse was left at the bus station in Edinburgh.
At the time of her disappearance, the location of the discovery, over 20 miles away in the nation's capital, had led police to a possible explanation.
Perhaps she got on a bus to go to England. Now, how many people that disappear end up at King's Cross or some of these places? People from Scotland. It's quite common.
But the detective's initial hunch would prove to be wide of the mark. Young Vicky Hamilton had actually crossed the path of the charming Peter Tobin. Following Peter Tobin's arrest in 2006 for the murder of a Polish student in a Scottish church, police suspected the 60-year-old may have killed before.
Not many people commit their first murder when they're in their 50s or their 60s.
I was thinking, has he done this before? Is this individual a serial killer?
As a task force dug into Tobin's earlier life, Detective David Swindle discovered a worrying connection to the disappearance of Bathgate schoolgirl Vicky Hamilton 15 years previously.
What was it that brought the team here?
We established that Tobin was living here at the same time as Vicky Hamilton disappeared from the town centre of Bathgate.
Investigators were convinced it was much more than a geographical coincidence.
So we've established that the bus stop where Vicky was last seen was here, and this is Tobin's address in 91. How far distance do you reckon that is?
It's about a mile and a half.
If Tobin picked Vicky up from that bus stop, it was only sort of 5–10 minutes drive back to his home.
Oh yeah, it's very close. Indications are, without doubt, I mean, she ended up in that house.
Theories were formed about how the charismatic 45-year-old had abducted the young schoolgirl.
She might well have asked somebody for directions, and it's quite likely that that somebody, unfortunately, was Peter Tobin.
Even in the 90s, sort of young girls were sort of aware of stranger danger and not getting in cars with strange men. So Tobin must have had something about him to sort of get her to be confident to get into a car.
Yes, Tobin was a person that everyone describes as a nice person, a person that could charm you.
A search of the property would confirm police suspicions that Vicky had tragically fallen under Tobin's spell.
The knife that was under the eaves in the attic, it was like a dagger type thing, and on that was DNA of Vicky Hamilton.
Where did you think Vicky's body might be?
There was absolutely nothing to indicate where her body was.
Operation Anagram was digging into the depths of Peter Tobin's depravity. But throughout his life, the manipulative monster was often seen as charm personified. In 1969, his 17-year-old girlfriend Margaret had become his wife. But the young bride was not headed for wedded bliss.
Because I'd been so lonely with him working, he had bought this wee dog, a wee black collie dog, and I called it Butte.
It was in the process of being trained, it was yapping a lot, he couldn't stand it.
On a rare occasion, Margaret left their third-floor flat. Tobin had been left alone with the 10-week-old pup.
And when I went in, I couldn't see the dog anywhere. And I said, "What have you done with Butte?" And he says, "Oh," he said, "keeps yapping and keeps peeing," he says. I just threw it out the window.
Some young lads apparently playing football below her flat, but when she saw what they were kicking, it was actually the dog's head.
He decapitated it and then thrown it out the window. I really realised, well, if he can do that to a dog, what am I in for?
This terrifying domestic abuse is revealing behaviour for Professor Lou Schlesinger.
Once Tobin has got you in his inner circle, once he gets close to you, he switches and controls you through fear and terror. To keep them in a state of constant fear is arousing to him.
To understand the driving force behind sadistic control, Lou Schlesinger is getting a personal insight.
The first thing you have to do is put your conscience to sleep.
Reformed pimp John Turnipseed was able to bend many young women to his will in 1970s Minneapolis.
How did you pick these women? Not every woman's going to do this.
You can walk into a bar and you just can look around the room, and eye contact is very important. There's two different look-aways. One is a look away in disgust, like, why are you looking at me?
Right.
One is a look away like, oh, you're looking at me.
Right.
And if you get that,
Yeah.
you know, you're already the dominant force in their life. You know?
Did you personally get, let's say, aroused by controlling these women? Was that
I got
arousing
more,
for you?
yeah, I got more aroused by the domination of these women.
Explain that a little bit.
Anybody can have sex with a person, but who can talk a person into just thinking you're God?
Did you threaten to hurt these women or
Oh,
beat them?
absolutely.
Did you
Well,
beat them?
I would beat women, yes. You had to keep discipline. Having a woman that'll do whatever you say is the greatest sex in the world.
Explain that a little more.
Like, I've been a junkie, I've been a heroin addict, crack addict. None of them compared to the high that I got from having 4 women completely at my control.
For Professor Lou Schlesinger, this thrill of domination is also paralleled in the lives of a most manipulative class of killer, who compartmentalize their lives and demand complete control at home. Bill Suff murdered 12 prostitutes in Riverside County during the 1990s, and all the while he ruled his wife with an iron fist.
He didn't like me going to the laundromat alone. He didn't like me going grocery shopping alone. He was the one that was supposed to be in charge of everything.
One of the common traits among all of these individuals is that the wives would say that they were all very, very controlling. That's one of the main traits and characteristics of a serial sexual murderer.
Our sex life was, you know, you're ready when I am. I would lay down and do it and be glad.
They're just objects for this individual's entertainment.
Tampa Bay killer Bobby Joe Long's abuse of his wife was so extreme, she considered ending his life.
I loaded a double-barrel shotgun. I sat there with it at his head and tried to pull the trigger. He woke up when his alarm went off, and he said, "Go ahead, bitch, you don't have the nerve."
She didn't do it. He convinced her to put the shotgun down, and then he exerted more control over her and abused her more for that.
During the late 60s, Glaswegian Peter Tobin's abusive control over his wife Margaret had escalated to an unimaginable level.
I was at his all beck and call, so, I mean, sex became a sadistic rape now. And I just sort of put my hands up and said, no, I don't want any more, nothing else, no. Just kill me if you're not going to do anything, just kill me, I can't take any more. Much to my surprise, he just got off me. I went over to a cupboard in the kitchen and took this great big long serrated knife and decided to thrust it inside me and twist it round.
She was bleeding so badly that she bled through the floorboards and onto the ceiling of the flat below. The injuries she suffered left her unable to have children.
In 2007, an investigation into Tobin's life had connected him to the murder of schoolgirl Vicky Hamilton 16 years previously. As police searched for her body, the disappearance of another teenage girl in Hampshire in 1991 offered a break in the case.
Diana McNichol was a young girl, 18 years of age, who had been at a Lip Hook festival. She was making her way back from there with her friend, and they got a lift from a nice person, a nice Scottish person.
Dinah was to be dropped off second, so she was going to be the last person in the vehicle, and she never made it home.
As detectives reopened the case file 16 years later, they unearthed a vital clue.
She had £2,000 in an account. That bank card had been used in Margate.
And at the time of her disappearance, Margate had been the home of Peter Tobin.
He was pretty friendly to everybody. We spent a lot of time on the doorstep, shooting the breeze and just having a chat.
Detective Jackie Sabir has come to the killer's former neighbourhood in the Kentish seaside town.
It's a very quiet residential area, a couple of miles away from Margate seafront. It's not on the tourist trail, so it's full of general Margate residents who live here and go to work here.
David Martin recalls his Scottish neighbour who had moved down from Bathgate in 1991 to be closer to his young son.
Did you see him with his son?
Oh yeah, yeah, his son came up most weekends. In fact, the first time he turned up, his son was, we could hear him crying through the wall, and I went and knocked on the door to see if the wife could help settle him down or anything. And he brought his son to the door. No, he's all right, but thank you for that we've got caring neighbours.
And the apparently doting father often used his impressive DIY skills to keep his 3-year-old boy happy.
So that garden there, that would be Pete's?
That would be Pete's.
Tobin enthusiastically set about creating a play area.
And how long was he building the sandpit for?
Well, I noticed him out the window and went down for a chat. And he was out there an hour, two. And I said, "You're going a bit deep with that, Pete, aren't you?" I said, "You're going for Australia." And he said, no. He said, you've got to do it properly.
And how big was the sort of the hole that he was building for this sandpit?
Oh, it'd be about 7 foot long, a metre or so wide.
16 years later, police would discover that Peter Tobin's interest in gardening was in fact driven by a despicable depravity. In 2007, evidence had linked convicted killer Peter Tobin to the disappearance of teenager Dinah McNichol 16 years previously. As investigators excavated Tobin's former back garden in Margate, the site of a sandpit revealed a horrific find.
I can still remember to this day what I was doing when I received the telephone call telling me that they had found a body. But that body was not Dinah McNichol, it was Vicky Hamilton.
After murdering Vicky at his former home in Bathgate, Tobin had driven south with her body in his van.
He drove with her remains in his vehicle all 470 miles down sort of the length of the country here to Margate.
You could never have imagined that someone who had been killed in Scotland and taken so many hundreds of miles away.
He has murdered her in his home. He's then cut her in half, and he wrapped her body in layers and layers of bin liners.
I can remember he turned up with a blue Ford Anglia van and a load of black sacks in the back.
I think it sets him apart, even among other killers, that he must have a stomach that can't be turned.
But Tobin's back garden would reveal yet another gruesome discovery.
A body bag thought to contain the remains of Dinah McNichol, brought out from what was the most ordinary of houses.
Dinah's body had been buried just meters from that of Vicky Hamilton.
One body would be found just under where the washing line is, and the other one would be just on this side of that fence.
Peter Tobin had brazenly disposed of the bodies under the gaze of his friends and neighbours.
And actually the gardens are quite well overlooked, aren't they? Not only by yours, but by other neighbours, aren't they?
Yeah, it's, you can see everyone else, most people's gardens from your back windows. It was just total surprise. He'd set them in cement and everything. Something that came out from left field, I really didn't expect it.
The neighbours liked him. He was always there as a helping hand, a nice individual.
2 years after being convicted for the murder of Angelica Kluk, Peter Tobin faced trial for the killing of Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol.
When I saw him in court, I was really surprised because he just looked like a small, frail man, which I imagine is probably the image he was trying to portray to the court.
But the lifelong manipulator would keep up his charming pretense throughout the trial.
When someone's in the accused box and you're in the witness box and he's saying to you, "You all right, Dave, mate? You fine? No problem?" And you're thinking, go away.
Found guilty on all counts, Peter Tobin was revealed as a serial killer. In the wake of his reign of terror, many struggled to comprehend the driving force behind the former delinquent's brutal actions.
I don't think anybody could say that they could bring up such a sadistic devil child as Tobin ever was.
He was sexually aroused through violence. That was within him. That's not learned.
Having looked at Tobin in the eye, in my mind, that is someone who exudes evil. In my mind, Tobin was wired wrongly, and he was born to kill.
Although his past had been studied, with his first known kill committed at 45, Detective Jackie Sabir suspects there may be more victims.
That is quite late for a serial killer to begin that pattern of offending. He could have been responsible for many other murders, given how he seemed very comfortable in the act of killing.
Peter Tobin will undoubtedly have killed other people.
I absolutely believe that he's killed more than 3 times.
In Peter Tobin's case, I think he killed much earlier on and then stopped for a long period of time, which is not uncommon either.
And like Tobin, many of the most charming and seductive killers started young. Ted Bundy's first known frenzied attack was carried out in his 20s. The Boston Strangler in his early 30s. And the similarities don't end there. Peter Tobin's other despicable traits indicate that he joins this most manipulative class of killer.
One of the common characteristics between Tobin and Bundy and DeSalvo is that they look normal. And if you look normal and you can speak, you can disarm anybody because you don't appear threatening to them. And so they're apt to relax and just say, "Hey, nice guy," and then they've got you.
Richard Trenton Chase, a killer with a lust for blood who would become known as the Vampire of Sacramento.
He
wants to explore the body. He wants to drink her blood.
A man who murdered and mutilated indiscriminately.
Most serial killers don't do random killings.
Created terror in a community.
Everybody was very upset in the neighborhood, talking about buying guns.
And pushed the cops to their limits.
I had it in my mind already that if the baby was there, I was going to kill Chase.
But was Richard Chase a born killer, or a product of his environment? Richard Trenton Chase was born on May the 23rd, 1950, in Sacramento. In many respects, his childhood was ordinary.
It was considered to be the typically 1950 dysfunctional family, which means that there was a lot of arguing, there was some physical abuse, but not to the extent that it was out of the norm of the culture at that time. As children at that time were very frequently beaten, and it was just considered that's how you discipline your child. There doesn't seem to be any severe physical abuse. There doesn't seem to be any severe difficulties beyond the arguing between his parents and the typical discipline of the day.
However, one aspect of Chase's childhood offered a glimpse of things to come. The young boy had a taste for harming and killing cats.
The torturing of animals is probably something that most normal children go through. Why it becomes significant in relation to serial killers is that whilst most children develop a conscience through their relationship with animals, they realize that they're actually hurting the animal. And of course, if you are continuing to torture, mutilate animals, you really haven't learned to develop the conscience in the way that children normally develop their conscience as they grow older.
Richard Chase, nevertheless, went to school in that area, and for a time at least, was considered to be conventionally dressed and able to fit in to some degree, with the other students. In other words, he didn't act totally weird, just only in certain areas when he was very young.
At high school in the mid-1960s, Chase began experimenting with drugs, taking marijuana and LSD.
He began using extremely heavy doses of not only marijuana but other drugs. Can a drug precipitate someone to go over the edge? I mean, just out of the blue, can you become psychotic without having some underlying disease? The tendency is to say that if you don't have some type of a vulnerability or a sensitivity, the number of people who took LSD here in this country and everywhere in the world, we would have had a number of serial murderers running around. So it seems that he had some underlying difficulties, but could it have precipitated the murders? Not in and of itself.
Alongside his spiraling drug use, the teenage Chase had developed a physical problem.
He discovered there was a difference in his life from his peers in that whilst he was attracted to women, he wasn't able to achieve erection.
He began to think that somehow, since the blood is supposed to go into the penis to make it hard, as we all know, that if he got blood from some external source as a kind of a supplement, that might do the trick.
By the time Chase was in his 20s, his behavior and beliefs were becoming increasingly bizarre.
He thought he was being poisoned. He thought he had bones growing out of the back of his head. He thought his stomach was upside down, his pulmonary artery had been stolen, and he was in great physical pain. It was all imagined, of course. he began to address ways to alleviate that pain. And what he did was he began to kill small animals and use their blood and body parts.
Chase was committed to the Beverly Manor Psychiatric Hospital, where his extreme behavior caused fellow patients to nickname him Dracula.
Richard Chase now is doing things with small animals and birds, you know, killing them, drinking their blood.
He needed extensive care. He was not receiving as much care as he should have gotten.
Despite the concerns of some staff, Chase was discharged into the care of his now separated parents. His disturbing behavior continued unabated, including killing a cat in front of his mother.
One time the mother came in and saw him ripping a pet apart and rubbing the blood on his face, that type of thing. And she didn't report it.
But the killing of cats was just the beginning for Richard Trenton Chase.
I think one of the interesting developments in relation to Chase's journey to become a serial killer was what happened in August 1977 in Pyramid Lake, which is an Indian reservation.
On a routine patrol, officers from the Bureau of Indian Affairs had noticed a pickup truck stuck in the sand. Looking inside the vehicle, they made a shocking discovery.
In the pickup, there's lots of blood stains, some rifles, and in the bucket was a liver.
And of course, at that point, they were wondering if there had been some kind of a homicide.
The officers scanned the area with field glasses.
They tried to discover who might be responsible for this dreadful scene of carnage.
Perched on a rock about half a mile away, they spotted an unclothed figure that immediately bolted in the opposite direction.
He's totally naked, blood smeared over his body. So they were just certain he'd killed somebody, so they arrested him.
The man identified himself as Richard Trenton Chase, age 27, of Sacramento. And he claimed the blood that covered his body and his vehicle was his own and had seeped out of him. While Chase was in custody, the liver and blood were tested. They'd come from a cow. Chase was released without charge. Then, at the end of 1977, after years of hunting animals, Chase graduated to more serious game. In a peaceful suburban neighborhood in the east area of Sacramento, 51-year-old Ambrose Griffin had suddenly dropped dead without warning. His wife's first thoughts were a heart attack. The truth was far more sinister. Lieutenant Ray Biondi was the chief of homicide for the city's sheriff's department and in charge of the case.
In December 1977, this was the Ambrose Griffin house. And it's a very, as you can see, a very quiet neighborhood, middle-class neighborhood. But Mr. Griffin was unloading groceries from the trunk of his car and walking towards the front door when a passing car went by and someone shot him from that car. Shot him in his own front yard.
There were no obvious suspects.
We did a background on Mr. Griffin and we couldn't find a reason that anybody would want to harm him.
And there was little in the way of clues. Frank Davidson was the CSI officer called to the scene.
Well, there wasn't much evidence to pick up at the crime scene. But the next day, a couple of shell casings were found down the street.
We assumed that it was just a thrill killing. Somebody wanted to shoot a person in their own front yard.
We thought there was some kid shooting the streetlights or something, you know. No one ever thought of anything like Richard Chase.
More shots from the murder weapon had been fired, seemingly indiscriminately, into other homes in the neighborhood.
It's unusual because most serial killers are hands-on people. They don't use weapons that frequently. They may, have one, but they don't use it for their killings. So this makes him somewhat unusual in the profile.
Richard Trenton Chase had taken his first human life, and the murder of Ambrose Griffin was merely the start of a spree that would shock the city to its core. In December 1977, serial killer Richard Trenton Chase committed his first known murder, shooting 51-year-old Ambrose Griffin as he unloaded his groceries in suburban Sacramento.
We assumed that it was just a thrill killing. Somebody wanted to shoot a person in their own front yard.
The seemingly random nature of the murder left detectives with few clues.
We thought there was some kid shooting the streetlights or something, you know. No one ever thought of anything like Richard Chase.
Come January 1978, Chase was again displaying puzzling behavior. Residents of Sacramento's East area were reporting a prowler entering backyards and homes. At one residence, the disheveled intruder was interrupted and chased from the scene. The house was a shambles. Chase had urinated into a drawer of baby's clothes and defecated on a child's bed.
This is the behavior of somebody who wants to utterly claim control over the particular scene, that particular house in which he has invaded. This is the behavior of a man who's showing his contempt for the people who live there. Ultimately, he's not thinking clearly. He's not thinking rationally.
On the 23rd of January 1978, Chase struck again. This time it was no simple drive-by shooting. Rookie detective Wayne Irie found himself drawn into the investigation.
I had been just recently promoted to detective and had been assigned to the Metro unit, which worked primarily misdemeanor crimes. So I had been a detective maybe 4 or 5 months, not very long. We got a call to respond to assist in a homicide on Tioga Way. We were advised then that the victim was found in the residence and that she had been, they believe, shot and had been opened up with a knife. You'd almost want to say butchered.
Homicide Chief Ray Biondi was one of the first on the scene and straight away spotted a sinister calling card.
The first thing we noticed before even going in the house was a unexpended .22 caliber shell that was in the mailbox.
But nothing could have prepared him for what was inside.
Had you stepped right inside the front door, there was garbage scattered on the floor and an obvious drag mark that went from the front room back into the master bedroom. There on the floor was Teresa Wallen.
I heard that.
She was dead, and she had been mutilated. Her abdominal region had been cut open.
The clothing is pulled up over her chest. Her legs are spread apart, without garments, like it was in a rape or something.
He had made an incision down the stomach, and that's an angle, and apparently had been moving the intestines and internal organs around.
It was a horrific homicide because not only had he killed her, but she was pregnant at the time, so he killed an unborn child.
I found a used yogurt cup, a paper cup yogurt came in, which had zigzag prints on it.
Right, okay.
And apparently he had been drinking the blood or
He had a
doing
good
something with the
session.
blood in that cup.
The extraordinary scene was unlike anything the officers had encountered before.
At the time, we were thinking we're dealing with somebody who, a psychopath, obviously, because of the way he mutilated the bodies.
I've been to a lot of homicide scenes, took a lot of pictures and a lot of evidence, and he was the strangest I've ever seen, you know, or a lot of the other people I've ever seen. So you don't have everybody, every day someone's cutting somebody open, looking through intestines and moving their things about.
The crime scene showed signs of what the FBI had recently begun classifying as a disorganized killer.
This was a disorganized type individual who committed disorganized type crimes. Crimes that would be not logical, that would reflect poor planning, that would reflect rage, that would reflect elements that could be read by the individual investigating the crime.
Chase's first victim had been shot and left where he fell. The mutilation of Teresa Wallin signaled a dramatic escalation of violence.
Here we've got the first human example of what Chase has been doing to animals for a very long period of time. Teresa Wallin was effectively mutilated. Her internal organs were removed, looked at, experimented with. But remember also, we have to go back to what we know about Chase from a very young age. He had erectile dysfunction, and therefore, whilst he might be sexually attracted to women, he can't express that sexual attraction in any way which is normal. So the way that this is manifesting itself is in relation to how badly abused her body is. He's curious about her internal organs. He's curious about her breasts. He's curious about her vagina. And of course, the way he expresses that curiosity is to desecrate and destroy.
It's very similar characteristic among serial killers, and he's certainly not alone in this, where they have no human emotions.
It's all finished.
So to them, a human being that they may have killed is just an object to be experimented upon, very similar to the laboratory animals that are used in experimentation. And it seems to be almost a very unusual childlike curiosity. So the serial murderer frequently will treat his victim as if they were just a very experimental piece of meat.
With a psychotic killer on the loose, the detectives needed to act fast.
It's always a race against time. When on a homicide, the first 24 hours are the...
Can you hear me now? Yep, it's finished. Hooray. There's one thing that wasn't really I don't know, I think it must have been this bit. Chicky get. Oh yeah, I did bring a mobile. And then I'm going to do a little slideshow. Dad, I got your other card today. NC! No, I've not opened it. Not until later. I'll be opening it later. Right, I need that camera. Hello, Nicole, my sister. Nicole's in the house. And Ruth Ann's in the house. And C's in the house. And Gabby's in the house. Yes, this is finished now. It's cool looking. It's a cool looking. My next one, I'm going to be building that, yeah, I do too. I've done that as well. All the ones that I've done, I've took pictures of them. And I'm going to make them as a video collage, whatever you call it. Video slider. I know, I'm not doing that. I wasn't doing that. It was a phone I was picking up. Eh? You cheeky fucker! Cheeky swine. You get that? You heard me. Yep, he's feeling a little bit better. Why not? What Nicole's just said. Whatever was in Gary, it wasn't good.
No, it came out.
It wasn't good at all.
Yes, well done. You're alright on that. Does it say 3+ on the box? It fucking doesn't all!
It doesn't all, you little shit.
It does say 3+. 3 years and over. I was fucking right, I didn't even know.
I'll kill him.
Hey, this one's age 8+. This is going to take you 9 years.
Behave. Can somebody slap him for me?
Yeah, it's finished. It's done. And Harry Plopper. You haven't got a picture of the whole thing, have you?
Yes, I did.
Come here. Let me have a look.
You do it then.
I'll stand up and I'll stand on a chair. If it can take me weight. You hear it creaking and groaning like a haunted house now. Oh, all fit on.
Try it the other way.
I think that got it. Try that. Ow!
No.
Yeah, it's all done. Look.
It's only got
No, you can crop it. Not bad.
No, you've only got that, look.
Well, hang on a minute. What? Right, let me get back up on thingy now. Hang on. Ride it. Ride it. Ride it. Yeah. Yeah, that one. Why is it not taking the whole picture? Hang on a minute. Let's try this. Try that one. Sorry. Ugh. That got it. Yeah, crop it. You
Gary, shush.
No.
Yes.
Don't you become my touchscreen.
He's been winding me up.
No, I have not. That's it. There you go. Perfect. Perfect. There you go. Are you thirsty, putty cat? Been hot today, hasn't it? You having a nice drink? Good girl.
Hush it, mister. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hello, Ruthann.
She's
Hope
driving.
you're okay and driving alright. Hiya, Linda.
What do you want? You want some treats? Want some treats?
Oh dear.
Want one of these? You want one of these? Yeah. Come on then. Come on.
I think he
Have
meant
one
to
of
be
these
doing
and you can have
his
your dinner.
challenge, but
Yeah, now. Yeah, good girl.
I'm having one of Linda's treats.
Yep.
Yes, see you guys later.
What?
Are you pulled into a gas station? See you later, Ruthann.
What?
She's going.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right, I'm going to call it anyway.
Yeah. You got a quiz later?
We've got a quiz later on, and it's just a random quiz.
Yeah, it's not a... Is it true or false still? No, it's not true or false.
No.
Well, that's not fair. It's going to make it rock hard.
No. Not if you're going to choose A, B, C or D.
Yeah, that just makes it even more fucking complicated. Good luck with that.
Or we can make it true or false again.
It's easier.
I can make the questions that I chose true or false.
Travelling grace. Travels.
Yeah. Safe travels. Right. I'm going to call it now. I will see you guys later on.
See you all in a bit.
Yep.
See you all in a bit.
See you all in a bit. Lots of love. Stay safe out there. Love you all loads. Bye, everybody.